So this video is going to be a much overdue update on the magnetization video I put out around taking the Killzone Volkus terrain, the new Kill Team sort of 3rd edition starter terrain, and fitting it all into a single box, a single 9-litre, very useful box. One of the things I liked the most about the Galadark season in particular was the fact that I could fit all of the terrain into a single, I believe they're 4-litre A4, very useful box. And so I really, because that made it so easy to travel, set up games quickly, I really wanted to try and replicate something similar for Volkus. I initially started targeting, so the traditional sort of 9-litre very useful box comes with a thicker lid with it's got some extra height on it. I've exchanged that out for just one of the regular flat lids because actually that fits perfectly. And then within this box I can fit all of the Volkus terrain. And I'll talk about exactly how I did that, show some of the spacing, and then I'll probably split this video into two because I'm also using a particular carry case in order to transport all of the game bits and pieces, which can also fit in here as well. So you can see some of this is sort of free floating in here. I might look at some different ways to do this with foam and stuff. Ultimately, for me, compared to like models, I'm not too concerned about terrain getting maybe a bit scuffed or chipped because it's kind of secondary to the core thing going on. It's background to the game itself for me. And so, you know, these have all been glossed, varnished, so they should be relatively hardy. But just as kind of like a a disclaimer up front, this is probably not like an ideal arrangement, but this is certainly for me. If there's a difference between being able to transport it and play a game versus not, this is definitely the ideal arrangement for me. So obviously you've got all the small bits and pieces, which we might come back to in a bit, but I'll just kind of like lift some of these out now so that we can get to the real important bits in here. So that's all of the core additional sections. We've got our corner pieces in here for the extra. I think originally it was in one of the Mechanicus terrain boxes, these corner pieces and some of these, and then we've got the actual strongholds themselves, which are the key bits here. So you might already be able to see that there are some magnets attached to the various parts of these terrain pieces, and I'll get them all out and kind of demonstrate how they all fit together. So you can see this all fits quite comfortably into this box without too much squeezing. And bear with me one minute, I'll remember all this. See, it is in there fairly snug, but I mean, honestly, that's kind of what I want, right? Like, I'm looking for minimal space occupied by this stuff so that I can really focus on the game itself. Now, there is another pack in the bottom of here, which I'll maybe talk about in a separate video, I think. You can see I've also got all of my Kill Team equipment in this handy little storage box as well. So I'll put that to the side for one moment and kind of talk through the key bits. So perhaps the most difficult part of this is that the Killzone Volkus terrain, the main large stronghold, is very tall. And so realistically, in order to pack that away sensibly without having to go to the full height 9-litre extra thickness lid box, really required the ability to fully dismantle these and take them apart. So key with these is that you've got notches on some of the terrain pieces and these little divots on the others, and fundamentally combining the natural kind of connectability of those those components with some magnets is actually enough to provide quite a lot of stability. So obviously here on its own this terrain has fairly minimal connectivity, right? However, what we've done is to take the platforms that sit inside these terrain pieces and magnetize them around the edges. I did originally have a system that had magnets laid flat, as is still the case on this one, and I'll explain why you can get away with doing it with the smaller piece here in a bit. But actually, as I said, Lobsterlifting posted a video where they basically talked through, or maybe a post it might have been, where they talked through adding some pieces of sprue to give some extra height. Hopefully you can kind of see that there, such that you can face the magnets outwards and have them match up directly to opposing polarity magnets, again flat on the terrain itself. Now the advantage to doing that is that in the case of this terrain in particular, there are these nice notches on the terrain. That means when a magnet is holding it against it, coupled with this piece of plastic edge running against this notch, this locks in incredibly tightly, and it means that the terrain is actually very stable. So I've got another one here and here, marrying up to one here and here, and so when we put all of the notches together, including with the magnets, this piece of terrain, if we line it up correctly, becomes really quite solid with the magnets attached. Now, I personally did something slightly different on the edge piece here because I was unhappy with the way that the magnets would attach to this wall essentially. I didn't feel like there was enough flat space to easily attach the magnets, and so what I did was instead, might be a little bit awkward to see on this video, but wedged them into the crevices of the corner. So there's a slight raised edge along here relative to this flatter piece in here, which allows you to get basically like a sort of crevice for this to sit in, and then cement it in there with the glue. Lining that up with magnets arranged then vertically rather than horizontally as we've done on the other ones here means that this piece essentially snaps up into that location under there, and then again if you line up the notches on these corner pieces so that they're all aligned properly, what you end up with again is something very, very strong. Now on the final wall piece over here, so what I've done with this, oh no, not that one, this one, what I've done with this is again exploiting the fact that you've got these notches and divots on the walls itself, and although these magnets are sat at this kind of an angle instead of facing one another, because these are arranged such that the polarity wants to pull them around like this, and these are arranged such that the polarity wants to pull them around like this, essentially just pulls the notch on the edge of the train itself into the hole at the side there and makes it very secure. Now, if you're playing a game, there is a little bit of give in the edge of this, but certainly not enough that you can't put your hands in and move around, and you don't have to worry about the piece falling apart. Not strong enough that you could lift this terrain just from that corner, but certainly strong enough that the train actually holds together, right? And this is before we put in the final piece, which, if I can hold on to it, which again is that last little dangerous little platform at the top where I've added, as before, magnets on just as recommended by Lobsterlifting that pull into the notches on this train. Now the coupling of this platform with this platform means that this then becomes incredibly solid. Like that Volkus terrain piece is now, you could basically like, you can manipulate it as a single object and you don't have to worry about it coming apart. So for me, that's ideal. I checked with the magnet sizes, I'm just trying to remember which bit goes where, but in terms of the pieces that have to fit into the corners, they don't obscure your ability to do that, so everything fits in and out as you need it to. Might be that one in there as well. Isn't it like that? It's one of the ones, isn't it? There's one piece that goes in like that, but essentially they all fit where they need to. The magnets don't extend far enough within those corners to make it such that you couldn't position a model or put a terrain piece where it needs to go. So really happy with that. That's the largest one. The smaller one is a slightly weaker connection, but again it's a smaller piece of terrain, so it's not such a big deal. So bring out all the core pieces now. In this instance, the attachments to the wall are slightly different. So along the edge of this floor section, this vantage section, there are small notches that actually prevent this from sliding left to right, and the same is true over here, which means that I didn't need to do as much of an adjustment. You could still have done it of adding extra sprue, but given that I'd kind of already done this in the first place and then found that it didn't work on the second one, I was quite happy to just leave it as is in this case. Now, I'll show you essentially, similarly to those corner pieces I described earlier, where the magnets are pulling the polarity into each other. A similar thing going on here, where these magnets are lined up such that they want to pull into each other, but because you've got the sort of platform that it's sitting on and the notches in place, it ends up just meaning that they hold each other together very well. So if I line up those there and slot them in, then actually that's held in place by the notch on the top of this section, the notch on the bottom of this section, and then the magnets pulling it in towards the wall. Similar to the other piece, there's notches on here. They're not quite as strong as the larger Volkus terrain piece, so what I did was just to add a little bit of additional magnetic support by snipping out the edge of this girder. Check if you can see that on the video. So snipped out the edge of that girder in order to recess a little magnet in there, and then on the opposing side I've got a very small piece of paper clip wedged in just so that it's got something to magnetise against, basically. Same principle applies along this wall. There's notches on here, particularly a big one here and here, which help keep the floor in place. So if you line those up, slot that in. Might need to put it down in order to do this. Line it up like that, slot that in. Then again, the notches on these wall sections as well help to hold everything together. And you've got a nice sturdy terrain section there to kind of set everything together. Similar principle here, got yet another magnet on, another magnet in the corner, and another piece of paper clip down in here. Again, snipping the small section of this bottom girder out on this side, just so that there's space to recess the magnet into. And then that allows that section there to clip in and hold in place. Not quite as strong of a connection as the larger piece, but again, by the time you couple it with these in here, you end up with quite a strong connection, such that it all holds together as a single piece. And you can move it around. I don't have to worry about if I've got my hands in here or I'm moving models that it's going to all fall apart. It's sturdy enough that for a game, it's all going to hold together. And again, the magnets don't interfere with placement of models or positioning. It's all fine. Just to highlight exactly what's going on in this corner, I can stop knocking the camera holder for a second. So see if I can get this lined up. So essentially, in this case, I've got 2 magnets on this side, matched up to 2 pieces of paperclip on this side. I've snipped a piece of this sort of girder section out at the far edge just so I can fit the magnet in there. And then there's a notch which you can line up, and connecting the 2, that's then sufficient to hold the 2 pieces together. You know, it's not like mega uber strong. If this was a model, I'd probably not be happy with that because there's too much movement. But when you're stationary, supported by the other pieces of terrain, it's more than enough to hold it all together. And so it ends up working out actually fairly well. Similarly on this end, again, notches which lock in place, piece of paperclip, magnet, and the 2 line up and hold into each other strong enough that, you know, when it's on the tabletop with the surrounding pieces all locked in as well, it's more than stable enough to support models on top of it, bump into it, people, you know, moving things around. All of the standard things that happen during a game as you bump the table or knock things, you know, it's not going to all fall apart. I can push fairly hard on all of this and it's, you know, it's fine. Maybe it's not as stable as it would be if it was all glued together. Certainly I think it's more than good enough for a game, but obviously the advantage for me is it means I can take it all apart, transport it really easily and set it up wherever I want to go. So, small piece, larger piece, and then the height of these is just such that it can fit within a 9 litre, very useful box with a flat lid, not with the extensible lid that lets you. I think it's designed for like putting LPs and things in, but you can do it with a flat lid, which means you can then use the larger lid if that was the one that you got. I think they do sell it with a flat lid too for other things. Get it all in one box, makes it nice and easily transportable.